Everybody, this is Jim Prusak, physical therapist from the Pain PT, and I have today a very special guest, Matthew Barmore, or Matt Barmore, one of my good friends here in San Diego. And I wanted to bring Matt on because he has such a great perspective on healing. And we talk about this stuff all the time, but I really wanted him to share some great insights today about the healing process and what could be some great ingredients to heal, whether you're healing from pain, whether you're healing from anxiety or unhappiness or whatever it might be, depression. So we're just going to have a little banter here today, and hopefully we'll get some good information that you guys can take with you. So Maddie, how's it going today, buddy?
Going great, Jimmy. Glad to see you. Glad to talk to you. It's an honor to speak and hopefully contribute something that's going to help people.
Yeah, and Matt and I just have a background. We go way back. We surf all the time, and we had these little what we call Saturday sessions, right, where we sit down for over coffee or breakfast, and we chat about stuff like this, what we're going to talk about today, about just different things happening in ourselves and how we can help ourselves become the people we want to be, and just bring sort of the energy and happiness to the world, right? So,
Absolutely.
Maddie, let's just kind of dive into it. And yeah, so what, you've been through a lot, and you can share some of your story, but like, let's talk about like this path to healing or ingredients to heal. And we'll just kind of roll with this. What do you think are some of these things that you've noticed in your experience that are crucial to healing and to becoming the person you want to be?
Well, as we talked before, and I was thinking about this week, knowing that we would speak and talking about healing and chronic pain, and as I mentioned, it's allowing, but it sounds so simple to be like, oh, I'm going to allow myself to heal, but it's not. Because we have a lot of beliefs and a lot of dysfunctional beliefs that we believe that aren't necessarily true, but we believe about ourselves. And I think, it's easy to intellectually understand the concept of allowing, but sometimes that's not enough. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that right now. I guess we could
Yeah.
we could build on it because I mean, when I talk about allowing, it's
What is
unethical.
allowance? Yeah, what is allowance to you? Because like you said, it's intellectually people understand, okay, I need to accept this or I need to allow this. But how did you come to that state of it? What allows you to allow? Is it the meditation or is it the awareness or what is it that is this allowance or this acceptance?
It's definitely, I think meditation is the process that enhances your ability to allow, because it's relaxation. And what is relaxation but letting go of stressors and letting go of thoughts that you have resistance around, things that that get in your craw that bug you. So the meditation's been a big part of it, um, but I feel like it ties around deep-rooted insecurities sometimes, things within society that we believe we have to be or we have to demonstrate ourselves in a certain way. I mean, talk about like men, stereotypically in Western culture, that we have to be strong and that we shouldn't cry. And one of the things that I've been doing over the years is allowing myself to cry, at home by myself. If something like, well, I put on a movie, or it could be a cheesy commercial. I mean, when I think as a man, potentially in Western culture, depending on how you were raised and what your influences were, that you could you can definitely get yourself into that place where that's not allowed, to show your emotion. And as I've been doing this over a few years, letting myself cry, it's getting to the point where I allow myself to cry in front of my wife and having that conversation with my wife that I need to let this out. And it's funny, it's like the most ridiculous commercial comes on and you start bawling. And the only thing I can really equate that to is the fact is that I've held in for so long.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you, Jimmy, but even with all the work that you've done and I've done and being open and sensitive to things, I still find it challenging, and I still don't find very many men as nice and as kind as men can be out there who would openly cry in front of other men,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's a great example because as much as you can intellectually tell yourself there's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong, I am a strong, independent man. I can take care of myself. There's nothing wrong with feeling feeling something strongly about, whether it's joyous and crying, whether it's, having loss and feeling it, but it doesn't matter. It's still one of those things that's really hard to let go. So,
Yeah.
it's okay. I know it's okay, but you still can't let it go. And
Yes.
that's why allowing isn't so easy. It's like some things are so ingrained in us and so programmed within us that it's just like, it's ridiculous to think that it's not okay, but you
Right.
still don't let yourself. And so one thing I think it's hard for a lot of people out there who are suffering from, whatever type of pain, physical or mental, um, is that you don't get over this kind of pain, physical or mental, in one session, in one time. It's like meditation, it's practice. So, you're in everybody wants to be that instant relief,
Right.
but this is something I've watched this unfolding within me of healing, of reduced anxiety, of reduced depression. This has been over years.
Right. Yeah.
And
Speak to that because we talk about this your process and how it's really unfolded. How it started out like more intellectual. You've always had this understanding, but it's went from going deeper and deeper, right? And in the
yeah,
beginning,
yeah.
there's a lot of times there's some resistance, right? And this is what I see in a lot of patients. There is this natural resistance to opening, like you said, to be more to diving into this work because it can be pretty strong and you have a lot of feelings in it and a lot of stuff can come up. So yeah, maybe speak to that a little bit about your journey.
Well, and once again, it is resistance, but what you're talking about is ultimately it's awareness and clarity. You have a certain level of awareness, I believe, like in the beginning when you discuss something, and as you mentioned, I did have a background with some energy work earlier in my 20s, about over 25 years ago, and I put a lot of time and effort into that, and then that kind of waned over time, and I got influenced by my friends and regular things you go through in your 20s, wanting to have a career and find love, and just kind of got more into the material secular way of life, never fully leaving completely, but then you come back to it. And as you mentioned before, everything starts off kind of in an intellectual concept. When you don't know, you don't know. So someone's telling you something, and you're hearing words, and as a lot of insightful, enlightened people have said before, words don't necessarily teach, but they're what we start with a lot of the times.
Right.
And so over time, there would be concepts that I would hear, via word, whether it be through you or through reading a book, and that it would resonate in a certain way that I'd go, there's a truth to this, but I haven't experienced it yet. And I think that's the unfolding of your awareness. The more you practice and you stop thinking about things and you start getting yourself quiet inside, and then you
Yes.
allow information to come to you, and and
Correct.
and knowing the difference, that's also part of the practice. That
Right.
takes time to be able to distinguish a thought that you create yourself, or a transmission from pure intelligence, from the universe, that's helping a helping information.
Yeah,
And
and this
so,
contrast, we always talk together about this, the contrast, and a lot of people that gets people hung up, like they'll feel really good for a few days, and all of a sudden the contrast comes in, which could for them could be a shot of pain, and it's like maybe talk about that, how we talk about how now you've learned to really embrace the contrast versus most people want to shut that down and resist it, and that's you,
yeah,
just
and I almost hesitate to even get into that right off the get-go if we're really
yeah,
trying to reach people who are starting off. That's overwhelming. That's an overwhelming concept. You know, um, initially, sorry, Jimmy, I lost my train of thought there.
no problem. You could
Say
go
that
back to
again.
what you were saying. It's just more we work, and I see a lot of people that as part of their healing journey, and this, is you're going to have contrast where we say you get pinched off. You
Contrast,
have
yes.
moments of times where either your symptoms come in or the anxiety raises up or depression.
Yeah.
And it's like those moments, and like you said, it is a lot of practice to get to the point where you can work with these moments of real intense sort of resistance or things that are coming up. And
I know where I was going with that, Jimmy. It was in regards to contrast and embracing it. What I meant by saying it being an advanced concept and like don't want people overwhelmed is I think initially you when you first deal with contrast, heavy contrast, things that you don't want or you perceive as you don't like, when you're trying to get healthy, the first thing to do is don't expose yourself to that contrast. The first thing is to surround yourself with positive thoughts, to surround yourself with things that feel good. And that will help you raise your vibration, that will help you meditate more easily. And like we said earlier, just a moment ago, as you become quiet and you start to receive information, not think information, then you'll have that ability to wrap your head around the intellectual concept of embracing contrast in the sense of something you don't want. I mean, like for me at work, I support 120 engineers basically. Fortunately, create a space where my relationship with most of those engineers is amazing. But you know, if anyone out there has worked with engineers, we all know what an engineer mind can be like. Sometimes it's not the most socially, capable individual, someone who's very, analytical, and there can also be sometimes a little bit of a God complex or someone who's arrogant or whatnot. And, I have someone like that in my work that, possibly at first, really creates a lot of contrast for me. I feel initially that they're rude or that they're expecting too much or they think that their work's more important than mine. Um, but, to get to that place where you realize this is an excellent opportunity to show compassion and to
yes,
appreciate um, anything that you encounter with. And the bigger picture behind that is if you can get to that space where you appreciate the greatest of contrast, you always keep your energy higher, which keeps your connection to the universe, source, whatever it is you want to call it, more intact, and thus you get the universe conspiring to help you. You're more likely to have answers that you need to address this person.
yes.
You can move forward together in a positive way, and it's going to be a win for both of you. And that's kind of you know putting this together in a quick small capsule of information. It's once again you start going down this rabbit hole of talking about vibration and raising yourself up and the universe helping you. Then you get some, you might be losing some people, in this situation, and the whole point is not to really offend anybody or not to get anyone thinking about the specifics of the underpinnings of the universe or how things work or whether or not it's one god or another. I don't think you have to really go there necessarily. The bottom line is posit. I mentioned, you said, what are the keys to healing? Allowing. But what else is it? It's also being extremely positive. When you're being negative, you're disconnecting yourself from the well-being that is out there in the universe. And
Yes.
you have to get yourself to you have to raise your vibration, out of, self-loathing, out of ambivalence, out of fear, out of anger. Get yourself to some neutrality,
And
where it's
so
like,
give somebody an idea because you've been working with this and practicing of how you do that. So people have an idea of, okay, you
yeah.
talk about acceptance, we talk about allowance, and then now we're talking about sort of this positive mindset, positive thinking. Like what is the practice you do for yourself so that you can be in that space and deal with adversity and things and flip it around in a sense?
Well, I would say when you first start off with this stuff, the most important thing is to stay general. When you start like talking about what, and making smaller steps, like, when you're really down, it's not as simple. Like I've been there. I've been suicidal to the point that nothing sounded good anywhere. I didn't even want to exist. I didn't want to go to heaven or nothing. So it starts with just really general comments of like, I can do a little better today. I can feel a little bit better. Is that possible? Could I, Is there a chance that things could get better? Yeah, I think that, you start really, in light ways moving towards feeling better. You're not going to feel great right away. It's just
Yeah.
it's baby steps. And there's something when you mentioned that, how do you get there? I just felt really strongly that I should mention something about my wife. When I first met my wife, we got a we had really good years of no conflict between us. But one thing I noticed is that she was always pretty passive when we first met, and I probably didn't know the extent of her own insecurities and her own, you know, in a sense, um, not self-loath. Well, I mean, there was some self-loathing in there for, but just basically not having a very high opinion of herself, and thus there wasn't any conflict. But as my wife started doing work, on herself to get through her own feelings of unworthiness, depression, anxiety, she had to climb up that vibrational scale. She went from, feelings of worthlessness, ambivalence, and she had to go through anger. And that
Correct.
was and at that time I didn't recognize that as a good thing. I didn't like the challenge. I didn't like, that we were fighting, so much for a short while. But in hindsight, when I was doing the work and the practice, I would get those epiphanies, and I would get that transmission that would be like, that gave me clarity around those situations, is that my wife had to climb up the vibrational scale. So for the people out there that are, you know, if you're at anger and you're upset, well, then you don't, your next steps are going to be going into neutrality. But if you're of a, but if you're, self-loathing, don't think of yourself as worthy, um, you know, that vibratory scale means you're probably going to have to pass through some anger,
That's
and
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
and
Yeah.
some and have your ego activated, for a bit, where you're going to be hard to deal with. Possibly you might want not, not, even if when you're angry, you're not going to want to agree with anyone. You're just going to be like, it's going to be my way or the highway, but over time, like I said, and how do you get there? It's practice. It's meditating every day, preferably, and you don't have to do it a lot. I think over time you'll find that you want to do it a lot. I'm addicted to it. I
Yeah.
in a good way. I
It's amazing
enjoy it.
now. It's
Um,
amazing the process where you've gotten. And just to go
yeah,
back to the anger really quick, because this is one of the things we talk about with this chronic pain is repressed anger,
yeah.
suppressed anger, and people are afraid to go there. But you're right about this vibrational scale of working your way up, and you have to go through these things, like you said, embracing them and allowing them. The anger is okay because it's not your end point. Like you said, you're going to continue, if you continue to do this work, you're going to go through anger as you work up neutrality, eventually get to higher levels of peace and happiness and joy, right?
Yeah, and like you said, and what we are talking about, like when you first, as you're learning these concepts, about energy dynamics, about meditation, about letting go, about having awareness within your body, having awareness in general about anything. Um, Jimmy, I'm gonna lose my train of thought again. Darn it. Um,
Well, you're just talking about having awareness of all these different states of neutrality, of anger, of as you're moving up this vibrational scale and you're continuing your awareness and you continue your meditation that you'll move, like I think you're saying, you're going to move through these different stages or phases. But like,
mhm.
as you just coming back to what you're saying about with your wife, as she was moving through the stage of anger, your way of dealing with it was really important, wasn't it? Your ability to have these epiphanies and to stay open to her, to allow
Oh,
her to move through that,
yeah.
right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, and that's hard because there are programs within us, things that we've done over and over and over again
Correct.
that our bodies are addicted to, and they can think faster than us. They don't have to think. They just do it. And you know, when somebody's aggressive with you, and I was, socialized as a male in Western culture, it gets really hard. I want to combat. I want to stand up for myself. But that's where that deeper awareness comes, and that awareness comes in the way of, the person in front of you who is acting out in a disconnected manner, angry, aggressive, condescending, maybe say hurtful, mean things. You only do that when you're disconnected.
Correct.
And if I have
That's
an
true.
ounce of connection, that can keep me straight and have that awareness that I can have compassion for this person in front of me who's angry. It's no different. This is a good thing to bring up. When people, it's typically easier for people to have compassion for someone who's typically in need of support or help. They break down on the side of the road. They don't have a spare tire. They need help. Whether it's you offer them, a ride into town, your cell phone. A lot of people can find that very easy to help someone of that nature. When somebody's deep in fear on the side of the road or is scared, they're not getting help, from the well-being that is in the universe. No different than somebody who's extremely angry. Yet we have a very hard time showing compassion for those who are angry and aggressive. Obviously, there's some more danger involved with it, but we're still talking about, people who are disconnected. And as we've mentioned, as we've talked many times before,
Yeah.
we're talking about whether, people being in the sympathetic nervous system, people being in fight or flight.
Yep.
Flight are people that you feel good about helping. Fight are people that you might not feel good about helping. But getting to that place, that awareness, not just from an intellectual concept. I mean, you
Correct.
can, me and you probably, 7, 10 years ago talked about road rage at length,
Yeah.
and I remember we were talking about, one time I was like, I'd be in line to get off the freeway, and then somebody would cut in on me, and we would talk about just how much I'd be like, that's not right. I should not let that person in. I don't want to enable this person in their behavior. And the way that, and at the time you were describing it to me is like, you're not enabling them. Your energy is actually going to influence them by showing compassion and let them in. It's not going to happen overnight, but it lets them in. And at first you would tell me that. And it was years where I was like, I believed you and I knew there was truth to it, but I hadn't experienced it yet.
Yeah.
And the words don't teach until you
That's right.
experience.
This is
And
awareness is so, I'm glad we're talking about it because I feel like this is the number one thing. And just to interject a quick story, because I
yeah,
told you the story
please.
before, but I think it's sort of relevant too, is the time I told you after reading Eckhart Tolle, and I've been in this great state of awareness, and I walked over to my brother's house. Um, my brother had a son at the time who was pretty young, and he was riding his bike, and there was these two guys fighting in the parking lot. And I was just watching him going, "What? This is very interesting." And
Yeah,
one guy came towards me and was like, "Hey, you want some? You want some?" All in this fight, really angry person.
yeah,
And I was in this complete awareness state of aware and still and peaceful. And he came after me, and it didn't cause any reaction into me. I was able to hold the compassion in that neutrality state and say, and what came out of me just organically was, "Hey, man, what's going on?" Very like neutral, very compassionate.
yeah,
And it twisted him so much he didn't know how to react to that. He kind of had this puzzled look, and it shook him out of his anger. And he said,
yeah.
"I'm not really sure." And then he just walks away. And I go, "Wow, there it is right there in real time."
One
And
is more
my
powerful than a
brother
million.
was my
Connect.
brother was scared, so he was in flight over it. He wanted to get
Yeah,
away from this anger, and
yeah,
here he was wanting to fight me, and I just stayed in this neutral space and
yeah,
diffused the anger. And so that's what you're talking about. But to get there and to do it all the time, it takes awareness, which is what you're talking about.
yeah. And that comes in small doses over time. I mean, yeah, there's some stories out there of the people who've had instantaneous enlightenment, and everyone's path to enlightenment or a certain level of enlightenment, not necessarily, at the highest levels, but our steps that we take in our practice. I mean, I guess that's just where you have to be. It's like you have to be patient. You have to just, I guess, what we go back to is the now. You know,
Yes.
it's learning to live in the now. Because if you're thinking, you're 9 times out of 10, you're living in the past, sometimes the future, but a lot of people are living in the past. And and like, I've heard this for years. People are like, like you hear it from all types of gurus, self-help books, like be present, be here and now. And that's one of the hardest things to wrap your head around, and you
Yeah.
hear it, you hear the words, and
You can't think of it. You can't
you
think
can't
yourself
think
there.
it,
You
you
have to be
know?
there.
And that's the thing in Western culture, everything is thinking, everything. I used to be so analytical. I used
Hmm.
to like I would want to ponder every single possibility, so I had an answer for every possibility if I encountered that possibility. And you couldn't be farther from the mark if you live that way.
That's right.
Um,
That's
you
right.
know,
You're
it's like,
totally far. Yeah, you're definitely not
I
in the
mean, you can
present.
do it. You can do it. It's You're allowed to do hard work in this existence as a human being. It's just, but there's a couple ways to do it. You can do it the hard way. You
You
can
can
push
s- you
upstream.
can
You can
suffer, or
battle
you could,
upstream,
yeah,
or you can allow and have very clear intention and put it out there and be positive with it and then let it go. And really, then you keep yourself in a space where you're not dwelling on what it is you want all the time, but you're just being open and you're enjoying your day-to-day stuff. Because usually, even if you desire something, it's not like you have to have it right this second. It's like it, you can allow it to come. But as you know, negative thoughts will, I mean, as a believer of law of attraction, you know, if when negative thoughts come in, you might wind up splitting your energy around what you desire, and it might take a long time, or it might not come in your lifetime. So it's just
yeah,
in trying to describe, allowing awareness. It's not going to necessarily help people with words, but the encouragement of keep trying to be quiet inside, keep
yes, yes.
meditating. I mean, yeah,
What's your
if you can.
practice like now? So just people know what you're doing, where you came from. Like now, what's your daily practice like now? Just so people know where you've gone with this work.
Okay. Um, I work really early in the morning. So most days I'm usually waking up around 3:30 in the morning and at
Crazy.
least
That's
and then
early.
I meditate for about an hour.
Yeah.
Um, and with the meditation, as far as the specifics, um, it's usually not, I don't use music in the morning, and it's not going to be guided. If it's going to be guided, it's more me internally guiding myself through it. And I've been through this a lot, but I do enjoy guided meditations. One thing that's really important, it doesn't necessarily start before the meditation, but whenever I finish my meditation in the morning, I like to, if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks, I like to do a rampage of appreciation.
Yeah.
You know,
Gratitude. Yes.
Gratitude, exactly. And it's everything. It doesn't matter what you're thankful for, because when you first start trying to be thankful for things, you might find yourself having a hard time. You might get like four or five things. But it really can be anything. It's like, I'm thankful for my bed. I'm thankful for my apartment. I'm thankful for, my body working right. I'm thankful for the healing within my body. I'm thankful for my job. I'm thankful for the wide variety of food out there. I'm thankful for clean air, clean water. I just go off, and I think about my friends, my family, the generosities, and if I after the meditation, it just puts me in a really good space, and then I move forward. Something else I've been doing recently is, it's really recently, just like in I've known about it for a couple years, but it's finally starting to sink in, and I'm seeing it this way, is segmentation, is where I'm really looking at every moment in my life into segments. Like, okay, I'm getting ready to drive to work. This work from my house to work is a segment, and in that
Yes.
segment, setting like small intentions and keeping my mind clear. And then you
And
get to
that's
a
more
new,
present. That's more like living present moment to moment,
yes,
which is great.
and then when you get to a new, like when I get to work, well, that's going to be there's going to be a new segment in there, maybe for a certain amount of time, maybe towards lunch, maybe towards a break, towards a meeting. I mean, to each person, it can be unique. But I find that when you create a segment, then it's easy to have a really clear intention, and it's
Correct.
easy to stay clear and be aware of what you're trying to do. And just recently have I started to be aware when segments are ending and beginning. So I find that helpful as well, as far as, it's kind of like a reset button. It's like,
It's
don't
not
carry,
overwhelming. Yeah. Like if you
don't
take up
carry,
a whole day, it's too much for people to, and again, you're getting ahead of yourself.
yeah, and not trying to carry, a bunch of garbage with you. I mean, it happens to all of us. Like just 2 weeks ago, I was at work and I had to drop off some equipment that was being accessed, that was being turned in to be destroyed. And there were some warehouse workers that I felt were being kind of aggressive, and it gave me an uptick. of anxiety, of aggression, and within me. I felt like I was being disrespected to a certain degree, and I felt in that moment I was walking away from that from that when I walked away from there, I definitely knew that I had to clear myself of that energy that I encountered in there, and the energy that I produced myself. And I think in that moment, having clarity that you're in a segment and you have this negativity, and I was definitely in a fight or flight, mode.
Yeah.
My blood was pumping. I felt, my face get hot, my skin get hot. I was in fight or flight. The sympathetic
Yeah.
nervous system was going strong.
Sure.
And when I walked away, I did brood over it. And I knew right away that it wasn't something that I was going to let go of easily. And so you got to take the steps that you can do for yourself that are going to help you release it. And, so I went for a quick walk. Um, and then, you got to start a new segment. You have to be
Yeah.
like, okay, that part's done. I'm moving on. Now, was it as simple as that? Absolutely not. It was probably a couple of days before I really shed it. But and talking to the people out there, that might, want some ideas of how they can do this. It comes to compassion as it starts with you have to allow those negative emotions. I'm not saying you should express those towards a
Yes.
person, towards you don't do it to the person that you're angry at. You don't go home and kick the dog. You don't go home and berate your wife or your significant other, because you have this in you. As we've talked before, you can go hit a punching bag, you can go exercise hard, you can yell and scream somewhere privately, but you want to let it out. And that's one step of it, is to acknowledge it and to let it out.
Yes.
But to take it a step further personally, because I'm really working deeply on compassion and keeping myself happy and my vibration high, is that I will then I'll be belligerent, I'll let it out, and then you take that in, and then I sit with that information in a calm manner and say,
Yes.
I know this isn't really me. I know this isn't what I would really want to do to anybody. I'm like, you know, pardon my language, but I'm like, I'm gonna fuck this dude up. And I go
Yeah.
through all that. I go through this fucking super strong aggression and anger, and I get it out, and then when I'm done, I know it's not me. I know it's not who I really am. I know it's an old program. It's something it was an old way of trying to handle situations that wasn't as efficient as the way I do it now.
That's
And
right.
and
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 then you come
so
back to, like, do you notice too, once you release that energy, you come back to your natural baseline, right?
absolutely.
And then you have
Yeah.
natural compassion starts to come in. And like you're saying, ideally, an idea where what we're working towards with this work is not always having to dump water out of the bucket, right? That we get triggered, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's being able to not be triggered in the first place, right?
Yes.
That's the ultimate goal
Yes.
here. But like you spoke really well, that if you do get triggered, you've got to release it. But the goal is always to get back to this neutral state, back to this compassionate, open
Yeah.
state, and then try to be there as long as you can, right?
Well, and that's the practice,
It's a,
So like I said, you get it out, but then what I do, you get back to that baseline, you're calm, and then you have that knowing, you're like, this is not who I really am. I don't really want to
right.
beat anybody up. I don't want to harm anybody. And I take the time to bless those behaviors, bless those thoughts with the highest good. Like I really I think of those are a part of me. Those things came out of me, and I'm like, raise the energy of those thoughts, of those ideas, and then and I release it to the universe, and everyone's a little bit different on this. You can say it's God, you can say it's the universe, but you can let go of it, and there's a higher intelligence out there that will take care of that information for you. That will reorganize that information in a way that's just right for you. And what that does is, it doesn't, like I said, once again, this is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. You do this more and more and more, and eventually you don't get triggered anymore,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right.
But
And you,
life will
yeah,
always show you something new that'll get in your craw, and and that's where you start to taste that compassion, and you taste that awareness, and it becomes a game and it becomes fun. Oh,
that's the difference.
here's
Yeah.
a new piece
Yeah.
of contrast that comes at me. How can I embrace this? I've been able to take other contrasts and turn it into something positive and good. Oh, I got a tough person in front of me. I don't have to be afraid. I know that raising my energy and being positive is going to shake this person loose more than likely. You
That's
know,
right. And you
there's nothing
speak
to.
really, yeah, and you speak really well of another important piece is that when people get triggered and they work through it, afterwards, a lot of times they feel either guilty or they beat themselves up. And what you're saying was a great point is that you don't do that. You have compassion not only for yourself, but for the other person. And you embrace this as a learning thing now versus in the past, right? You or many other people beat themselves up. They get more angry, more upset that they let themselves get this way in the first place, right?
Jimmy, you just when I lost my train of thought earlier, that was exactly what I was going to say because we were talking about, when you first start off intellect with these intellectual concepts of awareness, of allowing, when you catch yourself, like, so you're meditating or you're doing something and all of a sudden you catch yourself not being the person you want to be. You find yourself slip back into anger or to judgment or to be, condescending, and then you're just like, you have the beautiful thing, instead of giving yourself kudos for the awareness that you were in that space, you wind up taking that awareness and then beating yourself up for it.
Yeah.
It's like that was something that I had to do. You go a couple years back when I was started meditating every day, I'd have like really good weeks where you're having your clarity, you're not getting pinched off, contrast isn't catching you off guard, and then something gets you, and then you're like, I can't believe I fell for that. I can't believe
Hmm.
I that I lost my awareness, I lost my clarity, and I fell into a drama, that I got into being angry or condescending. And it was, that was how it was initially, but then several months, like 6 months later, there'd be an epiphany from meditating and everything, where you'd slip back into something and you'd be like, I'm not going to be angry with myself for slipping back in. I'm going to be pleased with myself. I'm going to be grateful for myself that I caught myself in that space.
Yes,
And
yes.
instead of being mad that I was in that space, I'm just going to be happy that I had awareness that I was in it and that now I'm not in it. And now I can be exactly who I want to be.
Exactly.
And that didn't
Exactly.
happen. That doesn't happen right
No,
away.
it doesn't. It's good that you talk about that because
You just don't stop. The practice doesn't stop. And
yes,
like you said, for me, I used to consider 35% anxiety acceptable. That was normal. And pretty much if I was going to exceed 65% anxiety, then I would stop functioning. I mean, if you had any background in psychology, and if there's a tool used within psychology called the GAF, Global Assessment of Functioning,
yeah,
and you know that's a great example of like where you're at vibrationally too. It's like, if you're gaffing at like 67, that's what happens when in mental illness and mental health, people in the 60s are kind of riding the cusp of being able to, you know take care of themselves, in a social setting or in a work environment. After When you drop below 65, people have a hard time holding jobs, having good social interactions with people, and really that's what happens. When your energy gets low enough, when you get deprived of well-being, and you have extreme depression and anxiety, there comes a point where you're not going to be able to function. You're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to
yeah,
interact with people properly. And for me, I have a lot of, great resources around me. I have a lot of hobbies and things that are empowering. But, a few years back, I was pushing myself so hard at work that it was like I was falling apart. Like, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was, I couldn't think straight at work. So basically, um, just getting to recognizing that. And I know I'm digressing, but thinking that you're okay with that. 65 was being the extreme where I wasn't going to be able to function anymore or even, do my job, and 35% being okay. I mean, that just goes to show how much we're only capable of what we know. And at
that's
that
right.
time, that's what I believed. I thought I was going to live with 35% anxiety the rest of my life. And that's when, like, and we've always been talking, and, you know, I've told you this before, and I don't, one of the biggest things that helped me get to the point where I could meditate and really do this work myself was the energy work we did together when we do hands-on healing. And you would and I would come to you like, I know you remember that really well, Jimmy. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like I had 6 months that I was in this tough project at work, and I'm like, I need this because I'm basically was killing myself at work. And you were encouraging me to meditate, and I had a lot of resistance towards meditation because I didn't believe that I could do it. And it was only through regular energy work with you that when I did about 6 months with you, I improved. I stopped coming. And a few months later, you know, my wife had found this really cool book on meditation, and I read it, and it resonated with me. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized all the sessions with you, because I would go into a meditative state while you were working on me, and I felt that was the only way I could do it, that I was like, man, I think I can do this. I think after all those sessions and knowing what it felt like to go into meditation, I was like, I could do it, and I did work, and I did do it. It wasn't as powerful as when you were doing it. It, it became that. My sessions are extremely powerful now,
Yeah.
but initially, that was the jump start that got me meditating regularly for myself, was just a little bit of help and you're not the only person. I've seen other. I had Reiki 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about it recently, and I was like, yeah, when I was having Reiki back in the early 90s, I was going into deep meditative states. I was having visions and, of all types of things. And yeah,
And
all
yeah.
those different events led to me being able to do it myself, to be confident to do it myself. And, you know, even if you just, I mean, to people out there who think they can't meditate, just do it for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah. That's
That's
what I
all it
tell
takes
people.
to,
And
to get
ultimately,
started.
it's to get to, and this is where my work now is more about empowering people because I'm a physical therapist, but as a people coach, is to empower people in whatever way, because I work with people mostly from a distance. I don't see people in person much, is to empower them to get to where you got in whatever way that is, because the most healing you get, and you know this, and the deepest healing comes from yourself in your own work and the sustained, long lasting healing.
Yeah.
And some people need that boost, like you said, when they're at some point. But when it catches fire and you can do this yourself, you know now how much deeper you've gone. And I've seen amazing changes in you. If unless you don't know Matt,
Likewise.
I know Matt. He's done an unbelievable turnaround, incredible. But Matt's persistence and sort of just wanting to dive into this and willingness to do it, and boom, it's like a little like you caught fire.
Well, I mean, and as you know, like it hasn't always been like it is right now. I've had interest for over 25 years, but and it had waxed and waned in some of those years. But I think it does catch fire in people. Um, I'm meditating pretty close to 2 hours a day, and I know a lot of people like at work and people that I discuss this with are like, where do you get time to do that? People have kids.
Yeah.
I don't have kids, and I do believe that I came forth with a strong interest for this. And maybe some people don't, but it doesn't mean that you can't benefit from it, even if you don't have the same desires to, take this as far as you can go.
Right. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be 2 hours a day.
No, not at
And
all.
you're building and I want you to speak before we get through this too about you're spending your time meditation, but really how important it is during the day. It's like they say, taking yoga off the mat. You don't just go to yoga and then all of a sudden you get in your car and you start screaming at somebody again in road rage.
Yeah,
It's how you
yeah.
integrate this into your life because ultimately that's where you get challenges throughout your day, not when you're sitting on your mat meditating so much.
The practice definitely continues into work. I feel like the base is the meditation daily, because every day you meditate, it's going to allow you a little bit more awareness in all your other environments that you're in. And as you said, we talk about appreciation, we talk about gratitude, and if you really want to be happy and being happy all the time, most of the time is the goal. You go to work, and I remember when I first started meditating and I was practicing law of attraction. I'd go to work, and the first time I had major things come up at work that were going to come down the pipe that I would usually be like concerned about and probably worry about, which wouldn't help the situation. And I would have to encounter something probably really difficult, I just started believing that things were going to be okay. Like if I had a major objective in my project that was coming down in 3 or 4 weeks, and I was like nervous about whether or not I'd be able to do it, I just said, hey, it's going to be okay. And I let it go. And it was funny. I must have not had a lot of resistance around certain things of that nature at work, because that's one of those are some of the first things I saw that started to come together. Was like
Yeah.
I would be looking for a solution. I work in IT, and I wouldn't know it, and I'd be a little nervous about whether or not I'd find the solution, and I let go of it. And I support a lot of engineers, and out of the blue an engineer shows up and says, oh yeah, I saw that this was, the thing that I was working on and that I needed a solution for. An engineer out of the blue would show up with a solution, and then that gets you, of course, that gets you excited. That
Yeah.
raises your energy, and you start
Correct.
to believe. And when you start to believe, I mean, beliefs are energy, and
Right.
energy becomes becomes material. And those were some of the first experiences that started to give me confidence around the belief that we are in a universe that has law of attraction, that what we think about is what we get. And when you start to practice that awareness, you start not only get aware of the things that you want, but you do get aware of the negative behaviors and thoughts that you have. And
Yes. Yes.
if you're really honest with yourself about your negative thoughts and your positive thoughts, then you can see very, very clearly that you have created exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
Your level of
That's
wealth, your level of
yes.
well-being, everything. And I was honest with myself, and I'm like, I was really honest about my fears, and I'm like, yep, everything I have right now and everything I don't have is exactly in accordance with the way that I think.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a brilliant statement. Yeah, isn't it? And to come to that
yeah,
realization or awareness of it and to see it clearly
yeah,
is liberating if you have it in the right mindset to see right where you can go versus it being because some people take it that in a negative way of like, oh, I'm not worth anything and I created
yeah,
this
yeah.
myself. It's my fault. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people in the pain world do that. They blame themselves. Um, but it's not about that. I mean, obviously it's not about
Yeah.
that like you talked about.
Well, and maybe my situations are a little bit more benign, but that makes them even better, because then it's like it's more subtle. It's like an example is this. In 2000, I got laid off in 2009 with the economic downturn. I got raw. I liked my job at the time. I felt at the time in my belief system, I was making about 55,000 a year. I thought that was good money for my age and where I was at. And when I lost that job, I was shell shocked. It rocked me to the core, you know? And it took me a few months to find a job. I mean, the market was tough. And during that time, I can remember very clearly doubting my own worth, doubting my own ability. I
Hmm.
had done a job that didn't require me to interact with people a lot. It was a very autonomous job where I did a lot of research. And I almost felt like I couldn't talk to people anymore at that time. And there was truth because I sincerely believe these things. There was truth to this. I struggled.
Yes.
I struggled talking to people. I was afraid, being honest with myself. I was afraid to go look for a job. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be smart enough or capable enough to do anything. And that's the truth I'm talking about. That
Yeah.
was my truth.
Yes. Yes.
Thus it wasn't easy to
Because you
find a
believe
job.
it. There's that saying is what you believe is what your life will be.
Yeah, Henry Ford, whether you think you can do it or you can't, you're right. Um, you
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
there's a truth to that. And I'm just going to talk a little bit more about this, Jimmy, because it's important. Just to say like what you believe. I remember thinking at that time strongly, I live in San Diego. This isn't a cheap place to live. But in my head I was so desperate. I was just like, oh, if I could just get a $60,000 a year job, and even if I never ever made more than that, I would just be so grateful that would be more than enough to make me happy and survive. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't nothing wrong with that. But I want way more than that, Jimmy. I want but but the importance of that statement is that was the belief. Thus, that was where I was at that time, and that's what I attracted. And I didn't get a better. It took me years to get to 60,000 after that. Years,
Yeah. Yeah.
because of my limited thinking, which quantum physics is starting to unravel and teach and show that your thoughts are energy, and that when you have thoughts, your brain releases certain chemicals, whether it's from you're from a state of being in the parasympathetic or being in the sympathetic, fight or flight, or in a place of peace and connection and homeostasis. Um, that's important, for everybody to know, is that your thoughts
Absolutely.
matter. The
Thoughts matter
thoughts
big time.
matter.
Big time.
And sometimes you got to fake it till you make it a little bit. It's like you said, it's like words don't teach, but sometimes you even though you hear words and you haven't experienced it and you don't know for sure, you're, you know, you'll allow yourself to believe something. And if you believe it long enough, then you'll start to experience it. It will show up in your life. It does. Um,
Absolutely. And maybe a little finished up because we have about 10 minutes. I
okay.
wanted you to talk a little bit about, because we talk about this a lot when we have our little Saturday sessions over coffee
Yeah.
and brekkie, um, about how we talk all the time about not perceiving anything as a problem. Like this concept of everything is just a situation, or it is what it is. It's not a problem, and how that perception of everything that happens to us like is meant to happen to us, and how that can change our thoughts, number one, and change, number two, how we feel in ourselves and how we behave in the world.
You know, the first thing I always want to go to, for me, also to add on to what you say, it's the way we say everything's okay. Everything really is okay, and it is okay. And then for me, I go down a rabbit hole that might lose some people, because then we start talking about a holographic universe, and we talk about our own holographic experience, that every person's experience is unique to themselves, and that the people around you that you have around you are only there because they have a similar belief to you. And
Yeah.
that's a concept that some people might have a hard time wrapping their heads around. Um, but if you embrace the idea that this is a holographic universe and that you're mostly non-physical energy coming into the physical, and that you are eternal in nature, that you always exist, for me, that's how it's so easy to embrace that everything's okay, because life is, in a sense, like a video game, but it's a
That's
high
right.
stakes. In a sense, it feels like a high stakes video game. I believe that when I'm done with this experience in the physical on Earth, that I'm going to return to non-physical, and I've always existed, and I always will. That makes it really easy to have compassion. That makes it really easy, and so I don't know if people can always wrap their heads around that at this point. Everyone has different belief systems, and I don't think you have to believe that to get the benefits from this, from this stuff. But I think that's where everyone's going to head with awareness, regardless. Um, but it is true that, I guess, once again, Jimmy, I feel like there's a cosmology piece to this that could lose
Yeah.
some people in,
And we could talk about that in another session because there's, like you said, we can go. And by the way,
Oh,
me and
Jimmy, tell
Ralph
me what you think.
go down the rabbit hole a lot. So
Jimmy,
I
where would you go with
this
that?
I think on a basic level, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole because we can for sure, is basically everything that's happening is neutral in the world.
Yeah.
It's our interpretation or our sort of spin based on our history, our beliefs,
Hmm.
our sort of filter in our brains of how we filter something that determines our sort of label of it. We label it. Because when we're in awareness and we're just aware, there's no labels. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
There's a sound, there's a smell, there's a taste, there's a touch.
Yeah.
Our senses perceiving these things, and it's our minds that twist what we perceive into,
Yeah.
oh, this is something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
This pain or this problem, this sound, it reminds me of something that happened to me in the past. But through pure awareness, it just is. There's nothing
Yeah.
but just this happening. And if we come from awareness, like you said, it's like we become that witness and observer. We're not those things anymore.
Yeah.
No, they're
Yeah.
not problems anymore. They're only a problem if we associate with them. If we become this external thing, we associate with it, then it is a problem. But if I'm in my awareness, it's like, that's interesting. Yeah, that's something happening.
Yeah. And once again, like, you're 100, I totally agree with you. I have experienced that. I think that's one of those things that's further along in the practice. And I think for people who are starting off, that might be a really hard thing to wrap your head around, because I feel like in some ways I am just starting to wrap my head around
Yeah, that's
around
true. It's a good way to
around
put
that.
it. I forget
Wrapping my,
that. Yeah.
or probably more accurately saying, being with that concept and really embracing it. That's that's one of those things that I think you understand as you practice, and then there's a knowing, because you're like, you experience it and you're like, I went over that intellectually before, and I thought I get it, but I don't really fully get it. But then once you experience it, you're like, oh, now I get it.
That experience is the best teacher. I always tell people.
Experience is the teacher. Experience is the thing that's always showing you forward. And one other thing that's really important when we're talking about vibration is you can lose knowing as your vibration changes. Like, I was thinking, like, yesterday I was in a very high vibration. I was meditating. I was listening to music that was complementary, and I just remember having such strong clarity about like, basically, I was, things that I desired, things that, like, sometimes you want things, and when they don't show up in the manner that you want, then you might get a little anxious, and that pinches you off from those things coming.
Yeah.
And I had some of that this week, where I really, really was hoping that things would break free, and they didn't. And I found myself having resistance around the idea of it not happening. And when I meditated, I just had such clarity. I had such clarity of how I've progressed. And when you're not in that, when you're not in that state, you can't see it. Like, what you can see in one
Yeah.
vibration isn't what you can see in the other vibration. And when you're in this practice of meditation, of consciousness, of mind singularity one, that everything's interconnected, that you can manifest anything you want, you'll have moments of high vibration in meditation or just in joy, and you wouldn't doubt any of this for a heartbeat.
Mhm.
You know it
Yeah.
like you know your own name. You know it's true. But all it takes is to get a little bit knocked off your game.
That's right.
Get depressed, get angry, get scared. You lower your vibration, and all of a sudden you find yourself caring about what society thinks again. All of a sudden you start questioning whether all the things that you've
Yeah.
experienced unequivocal truth and around, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, is this really real? That's what can happen to you just based on vibration.
Yeah.
It's like,
And
as
that's
we talked
the
before,
yeah.
this practice is not a college degree. You don't earn it, and it's yours forever. You can lose it. You
Absolutely.
have to continue to practice, and there will be challenges along the way.
And
But that's the
yeah,
thing, is you embrace them, because the more you embrace them, the more you love them, the more you find fun in them. It's perception. This is it. This is it, Jimmy. This is a great thing to say. Like, how do you do it? It's a shifting of perception.
that's right.
I was pushing several years ago. I was pushing against everything, as you well know, Jimmy. I was
Resistance.
against oil companies. I was against the military complex. I was against, big pharma. I was against food. All these companies that I felt were, all these entities out there that I felt were, purposely harming people for their own benefit. But that's not the truth. And the bottom line is it's what I chose to focus upon.
That's right.
As soon as you choose to focus differently on what you desire, I stopped watching the news. I stopped reading political political information on anything. Especially like third party sources, that almost like documentary news, on negative things. And then you start moving towards what it is you really are passionate about. I'm not passionate about pushing against anybody. I'm passionate about this practice, about spirituality. I'm passionate about riding bikes. I'm passionate about surf. I'm passionate about helping people become more aware. I'm passionate about creating more environments for people to get outside and be physical.
Yeah,
Um,
which is
and when
awesome.
And when you
Awesome.
stop worrying about things that you don't, not only do you have no passion to make a difference in, like it's one thing if you want to be, if you're passionate about politics, then that's what you're going to go do. You're going to be a politician, but if you're someone who's not passionate about that, but you're focusing time on that and you're not making it, you're not doing anything to change anything, you're just hurting yourself. You're just harming yourself. And,
And
and,
that's
and
the
so
great point there, is that I always come back to that point, is that you're harming yourself. That's the thing. You like when you let these things and you get under your skin, you go after them, they actually got you. They're harming you because you
yeah,
let it. It's not that they're harmful themselves. You let it
you're
be.
doing it. Yeah.
You do it to yourself.
Yeah, those things don't have any. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as having fake fight or flight. Like people, the media pumps, fear and hate, out there, and you absorb that because you think about it, but it doesn't really pertain to you. It's not your everyday experience. It's not like there's a saber-toothed tiger trying to attack you or bears trying to maul you.
Right.
Um, but you've basically tricked yourself into believing at that level that you have to be enraged, about what's going on. And the thing is as soon as I stopped focusing on those things and I started focusing on what I wanted, I got happier. I felt more joy. And as I raised my vibration, I realized that none of none of this really matters. And it's like you said, everything's okay. The latest in science that's coming out is that they're feeling pretty strongly that this is a simulation, that
Yes.
existence, that our life
Yes.
is a simulation.
Yep.
And for the people who can embrace the idea of eternal nature, because I'm recovering. Like I was anti-religion for a long time. I used to fight religion, thinking religion was corrupt as well. And of course there are elements of that in there, but that's not the overarching energy that comes from it. The bottom line is most people are good. Most people go to church because they do feel that connection to God. They feel that connection to the universe, and they want that peace, and that's a place they feel safe to do it. And that makes it great, and that's awesome, you know. But the whole thing is the one thing I noticed is when I really shifted my perception from negative to positive. When I woke up, that I basically when I read the book from Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, I
Yep.
was floored. I was floored because I realized, as aware as I thought I was using my awareness to focus on really negative things, and I
Yes.
was living in fight or flight. And when you finally let go of that and you stop focusing on the things that you dislike and only focus on what you like, you do change that way as well. That's
That's right.
it's another component like
Another
meditation.
component. Yeah. So that's probably a good place to stop now. And
Okay.
because we could go on for hours, and if the
Yeah, we could.
audience knows, we're going to do this again because I think there's value in this, even just for us talking. We have
Yeah,
fun. And
yeah.
if nobody listens to it, great. We've had a good conversation. But I think people will
Definitely.
gain some value of it. And, as our experience grows and we do more of this, we can share. And we're sharing today from our experience, right? We
Yeah, this
talk
is
about concepts, but we're also talking, right, about our experience and how our
yeah.
experience has shifted over the years, hasn't it? We've
Oh,
deepened. Our conversation has deepened because we've deepened,
yeah.
keep doing this work. And
Well,
what's so
thanks to you,
awesome
Jimmy.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, your guidance has been, I mean, you've been a mentor to me, and you've helped me out extremely, and I'm just grateful to have you in my life, and I'm grateful for your patience and the fact that we've been able to do this for probably pretty close to 13 years. That we've been
Yeah,
meeting and
it's pretty
talking
awesome.
about this stuff and been friends. So, heck yeah, Jimmy, this has been a really good experience.
Awesome, Maddie. So I'm gonna hit stop recording here for everybody else. You hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll talk after this little thing here, Maddie.
Sounds good.
Wonderful, awesome.